Hey mini enthusiasts, how are you doing? Welcome back, hope you're well and I hope you're having a great day. So if you're unsure what's going on here, please check out the previous video. We're converting this 1275 single point injection automatic mini to a 1380 carburetted car.
Right, just spotted this. Mark, have you been stashing monkey nuts? What's going on here? I would imagine where this car has been stored, there has been squirrels or something like that. So yeah, be careful because they eat through wiring looms and stuff like that.
So the plan is to narrate my way through this series, giving as much detail as I can because we're going to be quite quick at doing it. You'd have seen the first step I done there was to remove the bonnet. It's got to come off because we're removing the engine, but if you're doing any significant work on a Mini, it's always worth removing the bonnet anyway. Just stops you banging your head on it, and it's a lot easier to access things. Start a motor out straight away. We've already had the battery disconnected, and I am now just moving on to removing the brake servo assembly and brake master cylinder, just because it's a big chunk. It's not that difficult to get out, and it gives you so much more accessibility when you're trying to take off other components. Obviously be careful with the brake fluid, and what I tend to do is mark up the brake pipes. So I'll mark them with a bit of red paint or red marker from the master cylinder to the compensator valve, just so I know they're going back in the same direction, because it can be difficult to work it out afterwards. So it's always worth marking them, make sure they go back on the same way. And you might have seen when I removed the bonnet, actually, I went around with a pencil beforehand and just marked the bonnet hinges, so when I'm reassembling it I can try and make sure that the bonnet goes back on in the same position and not have to worry too much about getting the alignment right afterwards. Next step there, just saw the ECU come out, so there's only a couple of screws which hold it in, although they are a little bit tricky to get to. And as I go through this, you'll see already we've got tags or labels on most of the wiring loom. So as I take bits off the wiring loom, I just go around with a bit of masking tape and I write on there what that connector goes to. Now, an SPI loom like this, you cannot really get it wrong. The plugs only fit on the correct sensors. Aside from sort of coil connections which you might be able to get the wrong way round, it's pretty straightforward. Now on this we are going to be completely ripping that wiring loom apart and adapting it and starting it again, so it's not just a case of making sure that everything goes back in the right place. I need those markings on there, so when I'm stripping the loom down, which will probably be in the next episode actually, I can work out where everything goes. So we're progressing along nicely now, just moving on to the SPI unit at the back there. As I say, once all the electrical connections are off, we've got a couple of fuel pipes, the throttle cable, a couple of vacuum pipes, and then obviously the nuts that hold it onto the back of the cylinder head, and it comes out quite nicely. You might struggle a little bit getting that SPI unit out, depends how much clearance you've got against a bulkhead. So what it can be worth doing sometimes is just undoing the engine steady bar at the top and at the bottom if it's got one on there, because that'll allow you to rock the engine forward. Being an automatic, this doesn't actually have a bottom engine steady, it only has a top one. And when we go back together, actually, because we're putting a manual gearbox in it, it won't have that lower engine steady bracket on the subframe. Could have welded one on there, but it's a powder coated subframe, as you'll see later on in the video. It all looks really nice, and you can't just buy those brackets spare, I don't think, but Project Kit already has 2 top engine steady, so that keeps the engine in check anyway. All I'm doing now is just draining the coolant out the system. it's worth noting that the coolant is poisonous, particularly to animals. So if you're working outside or even inside, if you've got cats, or like here before, I've actually shut my garage one weekend, left it for a few days, and I've gone in there and the neighbour's cat was in the garage, unfortunately. If the antifreeze itself is very sweet tasting, and animals are attracted to it, things like hedgehogs, cats, things like that. So if you ever spill any, always make sure you wash it down. Don't leave any containers around with antifreeze sitting in there, because animals will drink it, especially cats, and unfortunately it either makes them very ill or it can kill them. So I always put trays under, I collect up all the antifreeze and then dispose of it responsibly. Obviously, as you can see, all the hoses on this car are nice silicone Samco hoses, all colour coded to the car, and got a nice big drip tray there. They're quite handy, those drip trays. I use them for just putting under the cars when they're just sitting there. Typical Mini, they always drip a little bit now and again, a little bit of oil, and just washing down the driveway there. So get my big engine crane in. I remember years and years and years ago, long time ago now, probably talking 25 odd years ago now, me and my friend done a engine out on a SPI manual Mini, and we didn't have an engine crane, and we literally just done it with a scaffold pole, one either side of the car, and put it on our shoulders and lifted the engine and gearbox out of the engine bay and over the front of the front panel. I must have been mad. I mean, I'd just ruin my back doing that nowadays. But Mini engines and gearboxes with the ancillaries on are very, very heavy. I think a 1275 manual, I'm sure with ancillaries, is about 150 kilos. An automatic, I'm sure, is heavier. They certainly feel more weighty. I couldn't actually find any specs on the weight of it, but I would hazard a guess it's probably about 25 kilos heavier than a manual gearbox. Just turning our attention now to the driveline each side. So I don't muck around here. I just take the whole assembly off, the hubs, the discs, the drive shafts, take the whole lot out. Leave the pot joints in there. So on the inner joints, if you just cut off the clip which holds the inner CV boot, you can pull the pot joint out, or you can pull the drive shaft out, and get it through the hole in the subframe. What you'll find is if you want to remove the pot joint with the drive shaft, it doesn't fit through the hole in the subframe, so you do have to split the pot joint from the drive shaft, which can be a little bit messy. You'll see there, might have noticed actually, this has obviously got some nice Mini Sport vented 4-pot calipers on it. It's on braided hoses. You should never leave the calipers just dangling on the brake hoses, because it can damage the brake hoses, particularly rubber lined brake hoses. So it's always worth just getting a cable tie and cable tying the caliper up, just taking basically the weight off the brake hoses. So where I can, I have removed most of the ancillaries. That's just a engine loom coming out there now, which is quite easy to get out on an SPI. I've removed most of the ancillaries just to make it as easy as possible, lifting it out and yeah, just trying to reduce the weight as much as I can. Just get the oil out now before we go much further. And at this stage, it's worth mentioning actually, it's quite important where you're positioning your jack and axle stands if you're using them, because you'll see the legs of the crane are only so wide, and I've made the mistake of putting the axle stand and the jack at quite wide positions before, and then you struggle to get the engine crane under there, so you've got to sort of get it in the position where you can get the engine crane in there. So I do apologise if this is maybe a bit quick. I know sometimes people say, I wish you could give a bit more detail, Keith, slow it down a bit, get the camera in there. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know I'm in between jobs at the moment. So I'm doing this. This work was actually done back in February, I think, and I was actually doing this in the middle of doing Project TARDIS. So at the moment, Project TARDIS is outside. It hasn't been painted or anything yet. It's literally just in primer outside. And Mark wanted to get kit done, and I had a bit of a deadline for getting TARDIS done as well. So all of this work was done in the space of a week. I think 4 days I spent working on it in total. So yeah, I had to get on with it. It was kind of my full-time job, really, getting this done and getting Project Bruce done for a month. So I do apologise if I haven't gone in there with the camera and given a load of close-in detail. It's just the rate at which I was working to a bit of a deadline. Just removing the exhaust here. So obviously it's got an LCB exhaust on it. So there's a couple of clamps up the front, just onto the sort of Y piece at the front, and then we've got a middle exhaust clamp and the exhaust clamp at the rear. It's a centre exit exhaust on Project Kit, so just on a couple of cotton reels at the back. Not too bad to get off and get the exhaust out of the way. You'll notice right at the very start when I took the bonnet off, actually, my garage has it's not a mezzanine floor, it has a loft in it. I put a loft in a couple of years ago. It's the best thing I've ever done there. One, I've got an insulated roof now, really helps keep the place warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And two, when I'm doing work like this, if there's anything precious that I don't want damaged, I just put it up in the loft. Got hangers and that up there on the rafters, just keeps it clean, tidy out the way, and I'm not going to damage it. Now you'll see I'm using a specific engine bracket for the engine hoist here. That is one specifically made for A-series engines. They are really good. If you're taking an engine out, it's worth investing in it rather than using ropes and straps and things like that. Certainly if you're going to take an engine out more than once. Now, I'm being very careful here. The engine bay is all painted on kit. The subframe's all powder coated. It's got detailing everywhere. So you can see I've got the foam mats up against the bulkhead at the back and up against the front panel at the front, because it is a real tight squeeze to get an automatic engine out. I actually think if the roof height was there, it's probably I did consider it. It's probably, as long as it is short, to unbolt the subframe and just lift the body off the subframe and do it like that. I have done engine changes and engine work like that before, and I think if I was going to do an automatic again like this, I might do that, because you'll see obviously this is sped up, but it did take me a lot of fiddling and faffing and jigging around and to get that engine and gearbox out. It's a later automatic gearbox, and I'll show you in a little bit more detail in a moment, but it is a ridiculously tight fit. It really is. I mean, I would imagine on the production line, the subframes go up from underneath, body comes down from on top, so they're not doing it this way. But I think if I'd done it again, I'd certainly do it a different way. And as you can see, actually, as I'm lifting up there, you've got to be really careful, because there's a couple of times where the engine gets stuck, actually, and you're lifting the whole car up. So if you look closely, you'll see a couple of times where I jack up and the whole body is moving. So yeah, just got to be careful with it and be patient. Again, it's only me there, so yeah, it helps when you have an extra pair of hands sometimes, but we finally got it free now. That diff casing at the back, and there's an inhibitor switch at the front that gets in the way, and there's just enough ceiling height here to get the whole lot out, and out the front and out the way. I've a little engine stand, little trolley. I put it on for just moving it around, and again just makes life a little bit easier.
Right, so that's the engine out. I kind of forgot just how difficult it is to get an automatic engine out. It doesn't really fit in the hole. You've got to wiggle it about. The main problem is the clearance front to back here, so the rear diff hits on the rear of the subframe. Obviously this subframe's all painted candy apple red, so I'm trying to do it without scratching it as well. But we got it out, bit of a fight. It's actually these later automatic gearboxes with park and the inhibitor switch on the front are more difficult to get out, because you've got this bit sticking out the front here. You don't have that on the earlier gearboxes, so that's a good sort of inch less space you've got down the bottom. I even had to unbolt just this metal bracket here, which is just covers the inhibitor switch there, just to give like a few mil extra play, and then it just about comes out. It is very, very, very tight. To be honest, it's the sort of job you want two of you, one on the engine hoist and one guiding it up. But we got it out. Next job obviously is we got to take the gear lever out. It's got an automatic gear lever in, so it did have a console in the middle. I've got the console out. I've got the seat out at the moment because we're going to have to get under there and replace the pedal box as well, which I'm not looking forward to. But yeah, they're the next jobs. I won't video this bit because it's a bit hard to. And the gear linkage or gear levers just 4 8mm nuts at the bottom. It drops down then, and then we have Mark dropped me up a new gear lever, which is over here. So we got a complete remote assembly. Hopefully everything's there. Fingers crossed.